Some accusations are so dark, so disturbing, that your mind almost refuses to believe they could be real. It begins with a shocking claim, something so extreme that most people instantly shut it out. And that's exactly why it sticks. Then you start hearing voices, not just one, but several. First, there's Jim Caviezel, the actor who once played Jesus. He stepped away from mainstream Hollywood and began speaking out about what he claims is happening behind the scenes. According to him, there's a hidden world most people never see.
When we were down in Cartagena, the guys would come up, traffickers, and they would, right in front of us, ask us if we wanted niñas or niños, and little boys or little girls, and people think that that's not something that happens here in the United States. Well, absolutely it does. Over 300,000 children under the ages of 18 were sucked into the deepest recesses of hell, and it's disgusting that the media hasn't covered it like they should. There obviously is really good media like yourself, but others that completely ignore it, and I think people need to understand, American people are starting to understand what is actually going on, and are sick and tired of it, especially with the south border.
Then there's Katt Williams. For years, he has tried to tell people that something is very wrong behind the glamorous curtain of Hollywood. He insists it's nothing like what it appears to be. According to him, it's not just a few bad individuals, it's a system, almost like a network. A group of powerful people remains protected because no one dares to speak up.
One world people exist because it's a very powerful concept to have, and far too lucrative and beneficial to not be attempted.
Yeah, I mean, if I was going to run some global power organization, I would try to co-opt every single leader, try to them in, offer support, bring them out to wherever the I have my big meetings, fly everybody in private jets, talk about the climate crisis.
All organizations have to follow the same rules.
Yeah, that's wild.
Recruitment is an important facet of all.
We have to get some young global leaders.
Well, understand, this is the only reason that we can...
And according to him, that silence isn't random, it's intentional. This is where things begin to connect with another name that shook the world, Jeffrey Epstein. When documents related to Epstein were released, people expected to see a few big names. Instead, what emerged was something far larger, a web of connections involving celebrities, politicians, and powerful figures.
Several of us Epstein survivors have been discussing creating our own list of names. Yes. We know the names. Many of us were by them. Now, together as survivors, we will confidentially compile the names we all know were regularly in the Epstein world. And it will be done by survivors and for survivors.
Well, I was just saying, if they're not going to release it, then we're going to compile our own list. And just speaking to not just us survivors that have come forward, but many others that are silent, that have answers and are scared.
I think it's safe to say that any person who has been quite often there's fear in coming forward and using your voice. Is there an added level of fear with regard to Epstein and some of the celebrity or well-known powerful people who are involved here?
Of course there is. Absolutely.
I'm probably more afraid of the people we don't know about.
Yeah.
The people you don't know about, the people who know that they may be on any kind of list that is...
The people who are purposely trying to get that list to stay away or not be on that list, that's who scares me.
Because the more you speak out, the more hurt you get, stalked online, and I mean, you've had people following you.
Oh, yeah.
This is where certain claims begin to point toward names like Oprah Winfrey and Ellen DeGeneres. Now, it's important to understand that being mentioned in documents or having social connections does not prove wrongdoing. However, the conversation surrounding them often focuses on patterns, who knew whom, who supported whom, and who gave platforms to certain individuals. For example, Oprah was known for introducing audiences to influential figures, some of whom were later exposed exposed for serious crimes.
Oprah's former faith healer, known as John the God, was sentenced to an additional 99 years. Back in 2018, several women came forward. And he still to this day denies all the allegations, but let's see what this man has done. Guilty for SAing and over 600 women and young girls. I can't even read this. He also ran a baby trafficking operation where newborn children were sold to childless couples. It is reported that these girls were held captive in Brazilian farms where they were forced to produce babies before being unalived after 10 years of giving birth. An activist said there were women from Europe, the USA, and Australia who bought Brazilian babies for as much as $50,000. I get goosey bumps, and not the good kind of goosebump chills when I read things like that, because a lot of the comments under the section on Twitter are saying, she knew. She knew. And how do you think she became so untouchable and so rich?
Supporters argue that she couldn't have known. Critics, however, say these connections raise important questions, and this is where the narrative builds tension. According to people like Caviezel, it's not about one individual, it's about a structure, something like an octopus, with many arms, one in Hollywood, another in politics, and another in business. Then comes the most chilling idea of all the reason why no one speaks. Because once someone gets close enough to that circle, they can't leave. They become trapped not always by force, but by fear, by secrets, by things that could destroy their careers, their reputations, even their lives. That, some believe, is exactly what's happening with people connected to Epstein right now.
I basically argue that Epstein was part of this transnational network that's also really transgenerational, that was created through basically this fusion of organized crime interests and intelligence agencies going back to the 1940s. And this, of course, would predate the existence of the state of Israel, which wasn't created until 1948. And these networks had already essentially come together by that point in time. And, I essentially argue that there's a significant amount of CIA ties, US intelligence ties as well in this network, and that, they're transnational in scope. And a lot of the organized crime network that's affiliated with this spans, has a lot of interest in both the U.S. and Israel, but also, has expanded through partnerships, for example, between people like Robert Maxwell and Simeon Mogilevich to Eastern Europe, Russia, and beyond. And I think a lot of the stuff, for example, that sort of percolated up what was true about the stuff people were trying to go after Trump for in Russiagate was really more related to this specific organized crime network. But you can't go deep enough to prosecute anything without coming up with ties to powerful people in Israel and also the U.S. And it's ultimately, affects, at least as it relates to the U.S., both parties very significantly. Yeah. And I talked a lot about in my book about this particular network of oligarchs based in the U.S., that have been referred to by the Wall Street Journal as either the study group and the mega group, and how they seem to have a lot of influence over what Epstein was doing, and also, the governments of both countries, and pretty much most of the known members or earliest members of that group, including, Leslie Wexner and Charles and Edgar Bronfman, have historic, if not continuing ties to organized crime. So I basically make a much bigger case than saying Epstein was Mossad, for example. I think just saying Epstein was Israel is kind of reductive.